Okay, good morning everyone. It's time now to begin part 3 of our studies on the Melchizedek priesthood. And we've made the point that Jesus is the author of the Melchizedek priesthood. But the Melchizedek who met with Abraham was a representative of Jesus, and not in actual fact Jesus. And it says that in the writings of Ellen G. White. But anyway, let's quickly recapitulate what we have already looked at and then go on to look at Gabriel. So the first point is that the redeemed replace the fallen angels in heaven, and that is found in quite a few places, but the one in particular that I like is Review and Herald, January the 9th, 1908. We're not going to read that again this morning because we've looked at that twice now, the last two studies. The second point is that the righteous are kings and priests in the new earth. And for some of this begins, being kings and priests, begins before it happens for us, if we get to the kingdom. So there's many different Bible verses which prove this. And once again, we're not going to read them all, but it's there if you look at number 2 and 3. The next point is that these redeemed are seen by John in Revelation 4 and 5 in the first apartment of the heavenly sanctuary, ministering, and they are presenting the prayers of the saints before the throne of God. And they have crowns on their heads, the 24 elders and the living creatures. The next point, number 4, is where did they come from? Well, the first redeemed to enter heaven was Enoch, the 7th from Adam. The second was Moses, who was raised before his body experienced corruption. See Jude chapter 1, verse 9. There's only one chapter in Jude. And then the third one was Elijah, who was translated without seeing death. And that's found in 2 Kings 2, verse 11. So Enoch was translated, Moses was resurrected, and Elijah was translated. And then in Matthew 27, verses 50 to 53, you'll see that a company of redeemed who were raised at the time of the earthquake. The graves were opened at the time of the earthquake when Jesus was on the cross, that they went back to heaven with Jesus, and they were a first fruits offering. So then we made the point from Desire of Ages, page 578, paragraph 4, that Jesus is the real Melchizedek, the author of the Melchizedek priesthood. And then we went on from the SDA Bible Commentary, volume 1, page 1092 to 1093, that Melchizedek represented the Lord Jesus Christ in person when Melchizedek met with Abraham. And we drew the conclusion that a representative is not the same as the person who sends a representative. And so Jesus was the one who sent Melchizedek, but Melchizedek was not Jesus. And then from the same place, you can find it, or in Review and Herald, February 18th, 1890, says that Melchizedek was not Christ, but the voice of God in the world, the representative of the Father. So that Melchizedek who met with Abraham had to be someone different. Then in the book of Hebrews, chapters 5, 6 and 7, in 5 and 6, it speaks of Jesus in particular, but also of the Melchizedek priesthood. And there's various qualifications that priesthood must have, which we looked at last week also in number 2. But then in chapter 7, it starts to talk particularly about the king of Salem and priest of the Most High God, who was the one who met with Abraham. And then it goes on to say that the Melchizedek priesthood is greater than the Levitical priesthood. And the point is made that not every high priest of Levi will be in heaven, but every high priest after the Melchizedek priesthood it's an everlasting priesthood. And the next one is that Jesus came out of Judah, so he was not a part of Levi. And that Moses spoke nothing of Judah as a priest. So the Melchizedek priesthood is not confined to the sons of Levi. It encompasses all who from any tribe who are redeemed. And it's based on the power of an endless life. Please read Hebrews 5 and the last part of 6 and 7 carefully. You'll see that these things are there. And then next we saw that from Desire of Ages, page 171, that the Christian life is not a modification or improvement of the old, but a new life altogether. And this is a spiritual transformation which takes place at the rebirth. In 2 Peter 1:4, that we are partakers of the divine nature. And this is something that we can only receive from Jesus. And that when we go to heaven, we receive a new body. And the origin of that body is not from this earth. It's not from our physical parents. So therefore, because we know that Melchizedek was a redeemed, we know that his earthly parents were not the originators of that body that he now had as Melchizedek. We know also that everyone receives a new name when they go to heaven. So there was only one person from the earth who was in heaven at the time in which Melchizedek appeared before Abraham, and that was Enoch, the first to go to heaven, translated without seeing death. And Melchizedek, or Enoch, was a king priest on the earth anyway, but he was a king priest and a representative of Christ when he took the tithes from Abraham. So let's go to Hebrews 7 verse 3 for a moment. And we'll just make this point. This is where some people have trouble understanding who Melchizedek is. Hebrews 7 verse 3. And it says, without father, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth the priest forever. So he had to have these qualifications. Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God. But he also must have this qualification from Hebrews 5 verse 1. Every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way. For he that himself also is compassed with infirmity. So all these conditions have to be fulfilled in Melchizedek. And as Enoch was compassed with infirmity. He had compassion on the ignorant and on those that are out of the way. But when he went to heaven, when he was translated, before he entered into heaven, he got a new body and a new name, from Enoch to Melchizedek. And then in heaven, he operated from heaven for the work of helping mankind here on this earth. So because his body originates with God, and because the spiritual life that he's given to replace the stony heart, if you like, we all must be born again. The new life originates with Christ, who has no beginning and no ending. And so therefore it can be said that he is without beginning and without ending in that sense, that he has Christ's life within him. And we understand that from the fact that Christ is within us, the hope of glory, and that this life of Christ within us is where we get eternal life from. And there's many other places in the scriptures where it talks about this, that if we have Christ, we have eternal life. So I think we've summarised everything very quickly, but if you have some problems with that, following it, then you should go back to Numbers 1 or 2 for sure and go through them again. Okay, so now we want to talk about Gabriel. And let's go now to Daniel chapter 7. And, Daniel chapter 8 and verse 15. And this is where the first appearance of Gabriel takes place in the Bible, the first mention of him. Just as the first mention of Melchizedek is found quite a long way into the Bible, the first appearance of Gabriel is also found quite a long way further into the Bible. So let's just go through this quickly, because we've still got quite a lot of ground to cover. Okay, so verse 15. And it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. So this being appeared like a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. So Gabriel was there to instruct Daniel, and that was his purpose. Now there's more meetings with Gabriel that Daniel had. And let's go to Daniel 9 verse 21. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. So, the person who explained to Daniel the vision and the prophecy was Gabriel. And it says later on that there's none that holds with him in these things to that extent that he understood them, except for Michael, your prince. And that's found in chapter 10. We'll go to verse 10 and then 19 to 21 of Daniel 10. And behold, a hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. So this is Gabriel speaking. If you read the context, and then let's go to verse 19. And said, O man greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee, be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. Then said he, Knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. But I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and there is none that holds with me in these things, but Michael your prince. So there was no one that held with Gabriel in understanding the future as well as Gabriel, except for Michael your prince, who is Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's move on now. we want to see next that Gabriel is one of the redeemed. And let's go now to Revelation chapter 19 and verse 10. And during this revelation that John got, we see that Gabriel and Jesus both were instructing directly John the beloved. But in this place, in Revelation 19 verse 10, in this verse, the interaction is with Gabriel. And John tried to worship Gabriel because he lost the understanding by the awesome look that Gabriel had, and he thought he should worship him. But it wasn't Jesus, and so Gabriel refused the worship. So let's go to verse 10. And I fell at his feet to worship him, and he said unto me, See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So here Gabriel says not to worship him. Now, if it was Jesus, it would have been appropriate. But Gabriel says, no, don't worship me because I'm like you. I come from the same origin as you come from. I am thy fellow servant and of thy brethren. So would a unfallen angel be a brethren of someone on the earth, a human being? And the answer is not really, not in this sense. And it goes on to say, thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. To have the testimony of Jesus means that you have Christ's life in you, that Christ has given you the rebirth, the new life. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Then in chapter 22, and we'll go to verse 8, we get more information which continues to expand on this thought. And I, John, saw these things and heard them. And when I had heard and seen, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things. Then said he unto me, See thou do it not. See thou do it not. And that immediately tells us that this is not Jesus Christ. See thou do it not, for I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren the prophets. So John was a prophet, Daniel was a prophet, we know Enoch was a prophet, Elijah was a prophet, Moses was a prophet too. So he says that I am thy brethren, of thy brethren the prophets. Now, whose brethren are John's brethren, the prophets? They are Peter and Paul and James, etc. They were, I think they were dead at this stage. Yes, they were. But also Daniel Moses, so Elijah, so he was of that same origin and had that same important work to do on this earth as the other prophets. So, of thy brethren the prophets, and of them which keep the sayings of this book, worship God. So this shows us that Gabriel is a redeemed human being. Now, when Gabriel first appeared in heaven, there was only 3 of the people in the Melchizedek priesthood. So in Daniel's time, I'll put this here, in heaven there was only Enoch, who we know to be Melchizedek, the representative of Christ on the earth. Then there was Moses, and then there was Elijah in the time of Daniel. So therefore, Gabriel had to be either Moses or Elijah. One or the other. Because the others who were raised with Christ were not yet raised either in Daniel's time. Okay, so let's continue now. Okay, now we want to go to Desire of Ages, page 780, where we see that it was the mightiest of the Lord's host who went to the tomb when Jesus rose from the dead. And we'll begin reading on Desire of Ages 779 to 780. Now, priests and rulers, where is the power of your guard? Brave soldiers that have never been afraid of human power are now as captives taken without sword or spear. The face they look upon is not the face of mortal warrior. It is the face of the mightiest of the Lord's host. This messenger is he who fills the position from which Satan fell. It is he who on the hills of Bethlehem proclaimed Christ's birth. So we'll just put that on the board, that the one who came to the tomb of Jesus the mighty angel who came there was the mightiest of the Lord's host. And that was he who fills the position from which Satan fell. So these are important points because this helps to show us who Gabriel is. He's the second after Michael, the chief prince. It is he who on the hills of Bethlehem proclaimed Christ's birth. The earth trembles at his approach, the hosts of darkness flee, and as he rolls away the stone, heaven seems to come down to the earth. The soldiers see him removing the stone as he would a pebble and hear him cry, "Son of God, come forth. Thy Father calls thee." They see Jesus come forth from the grave and hear him proclaim over the rent sepulchre, "I am the resurrection and the life." As he comes forth in majesty and glory, the angel hosts bow low in adoration before the Redeemer and welcome him with songs of praise. So this angel is the mightiest of the Lord's host, and he's the one who fills the position from which Satan fell. And each person who's redeemed from this earth will take the place of one of the angels who's fallen from heaven. Okay, let's go on to the next point now, and this is found in the SDA Bible Commentary, Volume 5, page 1123. 1123. And there we read, this is talking about the time of Gethsemane. So Gethsemane happened just before Christ was in the tomb, when he took the sins of the world upon himself. And Jesus' decision hung in the balance for some time in Gethsemane, whether he would drink the cup of woe of this world's sins, or whether he would just return to heaven instead. And here we read in SDA Bible Commentary, Volume 5, part of what tipped the balance. In the supreme crisis, when heart and soul are breaking under the load of sin, Gabriel is sent to strengthen the divine sufferer, embrace him to tread his blood-stained path. So who is going to Jesus in Gethsemane? Gabriel is what it says. So Jesus in Gethsemane is ministered to by Gabriel. And while the angel supports his fainting form, Christ takes the bitter cup and consents to drink its contents. Before the suffering one comes up the wail of a lost and perishing world, and the words come from the blood-stained lips, "Nevertheless, if man must perish unless I drink this bitter cup, thy will, not mine, be done." So that's part of what tipped the decision in favour of us here upon this earth. Okay, so next we want to move on to Desire of Ages, page 693. 693. And let's read from there. The world's unfallen, and heavenly angels have watched with intense interest as the conflict drew to its close. Satan and his confederacy of evil, the legions of apostasy, watched intently this great crisis in the work of redemption. The powers of good and evil waited to see what answer would come to Christ's thrice repeated prayer. Angels had longed to bring relief to the divine sufferer, but this might not be. No way of escape was found for the Son of God. In this awful crisis, when everything was at stake, when the mysterious cup trembled in the hand of the sufferer, the heavens opened, and a light shone forth amid the stormy darkness of the crisis hour. And the mighty angel who stands in God's presence, occupying the position from which Satan fell, came to the side of Christ. So the mighty angel who stands in God's presence, occupying the position from which Satan fell, came to the side of Christ. So this links these two things up, that it was Gabriel, it says in one place, that came to Jesus in Gethsemane, and in another place, and also in this place as well, but in another place it says that it was the mightiest of the Lord's host who came to Jesus in Gethsemane. Mightiest of the Lord's host came to Jesus in Gethsemane. In Desire of Ages, page 693. So we'll put that on the board, page 693. And then we can link these two things up, that it's Gabriel who is the mightiest of the Lord's host, who fills the position from which Satan fell. So here we have three evidences or conditions of the person who is Gabriel. And so with that we can determine with a lot of certainty really who Gabriel actually is. We'll just do this quickly to get this all in this study. It's interesting to note from Matthew chapter 17 verses 1 to 7 that it was Moses and Elijah that met with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. And they were active. They were active on this earth at the same time that all this was happening. And sometimes they appeared as men, other times more as angels. Okay, so there's only three possibilities for who Gabriel can be. And one possibility is taken away, so it's either Moses or Elijah that it can be. So let's continue on now. And we'd like to read from Ministry of Healing, page 475. Ministry of Healing, page 475. After this experience, Moses heard the call from heaven to exchange his shepherd's crook for the rod of authority, to leave his flock of sheep to take the leadership of Israel. The divine command found him self-distrustful, slow of speech and timid. He was overwhelmed with a sense of his incapacity to be a mouthpiece for God. But he accepted the work, putting his whole trust in the Lord. The greatness of his mission called into exercise the best powers of his mind. The best powers of his mind. God blessed his ready obedience, and he became eloquent, hopeful, and self-possessed, fitted for the greatest work ever given to man. So, let's take a look at Moses now. Moses was fitted for the greatest work ever given to man. And this is indicating that the one who did the greatest work ever given to man on this earth would have the greatest work in heaven too. We want to develop this a bit more. It then goes on to say, of him it is written, there hath not arisen a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom Jehovah knew face to face. So Jehovah knew Moses face to face. So what about Gabriel? Who does Gabriel speak with? He speaks with God face to face. And the second thing is that he was the greatest prophet. And what about Elijah? As Elijah's successor, this is found in Prophets and Kings, page 224. Prophets and Kings, page 224. As Elijah's successor, Elisha, by careful patient instruction, must endeavour to guide Israel in safe paths. His association with Elijah, the greatest prophet since the days of Moses, prepared him for the work that he was soon to take up alone. So Elijah was not the greatest prophet, but he was the greatest prophet since Moses. So Elijah was the greatest since Moses. But Moses overall was the greatest. So Moses was the only prophet who spoke face to face with God, as he did on Mount Sinai. And for a total period of 80 days, Moses communed with God, and that was an incredibly elevating experience for Moses to commune with God, because God is the life giver and life comes from him. And therefore, Moses, we can conclude that Gabriel equals Moses. Moses is his name on earth, and Gabriel is his name on heaven. In Desire of Ages, page 234, we can read, "It was Gabriel, the angel next in rank to the Son of God, who came with the divine message to Daniel, and that he occupied the position from which Satan fell." We'll just quickly go to Jude 9. And there we read how Moses was resurrected. Jude verse 9. "Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, does not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, 'The Lord rebuked thee.'" So Moses' body was disputed by Satan. Satan said, "You can't raise Moses from the dead." But the Lord rebuked him and went ahead and raised Moses to life. And then Moses began, once he went to heaven, I'm sure he did a long training, and then he appears in the time of Daniel, I think about 1,000 years later. So we can see that the Melchizedek priesthood is a priesthood of endless life, and it's a priesthood of redeemed who have Christ's life in them. They're truly born again, they have the new life of Christ. They don't keep the Sabbath as a legal document. They keep it because the law is written in their hearts. They keep God's law because it becomes a part of their life and their being. And when their time goes, whether they're the 144,000 or whether they're raised with the general resurrection, however, they go back to heaven. They will receive a new body before they can go into the heavenly gates. So when they're raised from the dead, they get a new body. And this body has no beginning of days nor end of life, because it comes from God. It's direct created body that they get at that time. So they have the life of Christ in them. That doesn't make them God, but it means that they are partakers of the divine nature. They've been recreated by creative power, and they serve God in his eternal kingdom. Okay, so we'll stop there. We could add some more information to this, but we have tried to encapsulate in this third presentation how Moses has become Gabriel. And so we'll stop there. Thank you.